right, here we are. SportsBit betting insight today, Tuesday, September 27th. Paulie and Teddy. Big game breakdown. We'll sneak in some football early. Kansas, Texas Tech. UConn and Houston, and a huge series tonight in Toronto with the Orioles and the Blue Jays. Deep dive. What does LSU do now? And we'll look at some options. Who's the favorite now to take over? And more coaches fired as well. And, of course, the play of the day. Yesterday, Teddy, you said the Saints stunk. They can't stop a nosebleed. Atlanta went up and down the field, scored six straight possessions against the Saints, and get the win on Monday Night Football in a shootout.
Yeah, nice to see the play of the day. Cash nice and easy. Early in the third quarter, we're able to improve our record now 14-6-1 here in football season. I'll take 70% any day of the week. But, what do we call it from New Orleans? Let's call it what it is. This team died one possession into the game. That muffed punt after they had a 7-0 lead. They never looked the same after that. It seemed like one miscue took the life out of New Orleans. The crowd felt it. The team sensed it. And remember, they were up 7-0 when it happened. It's first quarter stuff. So that stands out to me, teams that are not responding well to adversity. You're looking for teams that are worse than New Orleans in the NFL. You can make a case there's 5. The Titans, the Browns, the Niners, the Jags, the Bears. That's it. And frankly, you might be able to make a case that a team like Jacksonville or Chicago is better than New Orleans right now. That Saints defense just can't stop anything.
And that's 3-0 to the over for the Falcons in 3 shootouts. My question to you is, are they any good? Remember, they got off to that hot start last year.
Yeah, we'll find out soon enough. Coming up for Atlanta, they have Carolina, at Denver, at Seattle. That's a pretty tough trio of games. And, of course, we all remember the Falcons started 6-1 last year, then closed out with a 2-7 finish. Nice back-to-back road wins. Matt Ryan off to the best start of his career. If Quinn can coach up this defense, but of course, that's a pretty big if, considering how poorly the Falcons defense has played both last year and so far this season.
Bad beats the Blue Jays. This cannot happen with a week left in the season. They're up 3-1 in the 8th. Haps cruising, and they don't bring in Asuna in the 9th. It's grilled cheese, Grilly, and he blows it, and they lose 7-5 as the Yankees put up a 5 spot in the 9th.
Yeah, and then let's give the Yankees some credit, man. We've written this team off how many times, Paulie? And every time they keep fighting hard, fighting right through the final pitch of the 9th inning. But you're right for Toronto. There have been bullpen issues at times this season. The pitching staff's been pretty good for the Blue Jays this season. They are where they are because of that pitching, every bit as much as the lineup, which hasn't produced anywhere near in 2016 what they did in 2015. But you're right. Blown save meltdowns in the final week of the regular season, never a good sign moving forward.
Bad bets. How about the Cardinals? They get drubbed at home by the Reds. They're 33-42 at home. Guess what? They don't play a road game the rest of the season.
Yeah, and of course, no team has cost their backers more at home than the Cardinals this year. Dead last in MLB in profitability at Busch Stadium. Even miserable teams. The Twins have been awful all year. The Braves, remember when Atlanta didn't win a home game for like a month and a half? The D-backs been awful at home all year. All of those teams haven't cost their backers more than St. Louis because the Cards, like last night, they're always chalk, or they're mostly chalk at home. And everyone's looking at St. Louis, as well as the Mets and the Giants going, must win, must win, must win. Must win doesn't mean will win. The Reds blew them out last night. A very bad bet for all those who were trying to follow the St. Louis train.
Well said. Bad bet. The Tigers. They are 2-14 this year against the Indians. They got 3 more left with them at home. I don't think we've ever seen this before. This is not a last place team against a first place team. This is first place against second place, and they're 2-14. Congrats to the Indians, their first division title since 2007. And back to Monday Night Football, Teddy. Bad bet. The under. Again, that was a shootout, and did you see any sharp money here on the under?
Yeah, look, there's a cap above totals, maybe 52 and a half or so. Let's call it a cap. Because what happens is there are syndicates out there, big betting groups that don't like NFL totals above 52 or so. So what do? They bet under. Whenever you see a total, 53, 54, 55, you don't have to worry about that total just going through the roof because the syndicates will auto bet it under. Guess what? The public got the total right last night. Didn't go to 55, didn't go to 56. Because those deeper pocketed groups had a pretty big chunk of change on the under that was dead by midway through the third quarter, although it was dead well before halftime.
Bad for the books. A lot of money on the Marlins. You can't handicap human emotion. That was a real tearjerker when D. Gordon led off the game with a home run, and he's crying as he crosses home plate.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. What an emotional night for him. Let's give him credit for showing up for this game. And Bartolo Colon wasn't sharp. It was 7-0 by the third inning. I think the Mets were every bit as affected by the emotion as the Marlins were. Didn't work out in New York's favor. And guess what? This was a bad result for the house because there was a ton of Miami money before the first pitch. The Marlins were as high as plus 125 during the day. They went off as high as minus 119 favorites.
And two more, Arizona and the Cubbies. Cubbies blow out the Pirates.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona, another big dog cash bet from plus 180 to plus 160. Kind of a no-show for the Nats last night. Not a good result for the house there. And the Cubs take money at Pittsburgh. I'm telling you, the books that cater to the public really, really, really hate that team. Easy run line winner for Chicago last night.
What'd you think of the debate?
Yeah, well, we got to touch on it. Now, let's talk about this. Who do you think our audience is voting for? I got to think, certainly when we talk about the two candidates, there's lots of Trump support among white males, and that's the biggest demographic of sports bettors. That being said, our audience isn't all white, man. We've got Latinos, we've got Asian Americans, we've got African Americans. That's the beauty of sports betting. It's male, but boy, it covers all races and colors. So while there's a fair bit of Trump support among the white males in our audience, I'm sure there isn't among those who aren't. Now, when we talk about the two candidates, Paulie, the question for me is which one will help our agenda? Not about who you're voting for. Which one matters to sports bettors? Who helps?
I don't think any of them do. Neither.
I'm with you on that. I mean, Trump does have a pro-gambling past, obviously, a guy who's owned casinos. But in general, Democrats have been better about expanding gambling from state to state than Republicans have. And of course, it was the Republicans who passed the UIGEA back in 2006 that pretty much effed up the offshore sports betting world for U.S. citizens ever since. I mean, my take, neither Trump nor Clinton will do anything to help the sports betting or poker communities for that matter. Anything that's going to happen under their watch will happen by accident. There is a candidate who has been pro-gambling. Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson was not on the debate stage last night, but he's the only candidate that I know of who has a legitimate pro-gambling stance for online sports betting, for online poker, and for daily fantasy. But of course, then you have people, throw your vote away on a third-party candidate. Guess what? we're in the mess we're in because we've been voting for Democrats and Republicans for 150 years. And I'll give you a hint, none of the votes count unless you're in a swing state. And even then, do those Florida ballots from 2000 ever get recounted? I don't think so. In my opinion, the third-party candidate is the only pro-sports betting candidate that we can find.
Lester Holt, toughen up, Buttercup. We lost control of that early. That was horrible. Get some control, Lester. That thing got off the wheels came off right away. Horrible. All right, big game breakdown up next. We'll do football, a couple games to touch on Thursday, and the Orioles and the Blue Jays on SportsBit. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
All right, back on SportsBit. Time for big game breakdown. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Kansas on the road to take on Texas Tech. The Red Raiders laying 28.5, 80 the total. This is on Fox Sports 1 Thursday night. What has Cliff Kingsbury done that some people think he's in the running for the LSU job? He's one game over 500 in 41 games.
Yeah, the guy's 21-20 through 41 games. Now, that's not necessarily easy to do in Lubbock at a place like Texas Tech. And Kingsbury, no question, for a team like LSU, Kingsbury, the guy can design an offense. That being said, the defense has been absolutely clueless throughout his tenure, Paulie. That hasn't changed. The Texas Tech defense has allowed 42 points or more 16 times in his last 26 games over 3 years. So we know the Red Raiders can score points in bunches. And yet, when we're talking about laying 4 touchdowns with a team that has allowed 42 or more 16 times in the last 26 games, hard for me to get to the window laying this type of a price with a team that I can't trust to get a stop at any point during the game.
Hey, Kansas is on national television. They hung around in this game last year, but it doesn't really inspire confidence in the betting markets when you get blown out by Ohio and Memphis.
Yeah, it sure doesn't. And, the Ohio loss blown out right in the first quarter. The Memphis loss blown out right in the first quarter. Yeah, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence in the betting markets. And sure, they hung around last year. They were plus 33 home dogs. They lost the game 30-20, but it was a nasty day. The Texas Tech offense didn't really click in that contest. And, we talk about the Jayhawks. I mean, Charlie Weiss left a big mess behind. It's the second year for David Beatty. I'm not going to call it a hopeless program because Mark Mangino did something with Kansas, but this isn't going to be a quick turnaround for the Jayhawks. That being said, when you see these big, ugly underdogs, especially major conference big, ugly underdogs, that don't get these, spotlight TV games, you know what? They tend to try harder because they don't want to embarrass themselves on national TV, and they tend to try harder for the entire game. Although, if things get ugly early, boy, the Jayhawks not a team that I trust to fight right down to the final gun in a situation where they're trailing by 4 touchdowns. So not a game that I plan on getting involved with. Certainly not at the current number.
Game number 2, live odds, sportsbookreview.com, Connecticut and Houston. Houston 28-51 the total on ESPN Thursday. Revenge spot here for Houston. This is the one team that beat them last year.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the TV motivation for a team like Kansas. They don't want to get embarrassed on national TV when people are watching, even though they get embarrassed on a weekly basis when people aren't watching. Very different motivation for these big TV games for the Houston Cougars because this is a squad that has a very real chance to be unbeaten in November when they host Louisville. So they can't afford any kind of a let up when folks are watching. The playoffs are very much in sight for this Houston squad, and that means they click. And, we saw it last week against Texas State where the offense, they didn't punt before halftime. The game was over well before halftime. Houston, once they get rolling, they're a tough offense to stop.
Yep. UConn plays solid defense, no playmakers on offense. All 4 UConn games this year have been decided by a touchdown or less. 0 losses by 28 points last year or more. Backs average just 3.5 yards per carry, and a quarterback only 2 touchdowns in 4 games. One more.
Yeah, it's a Huskies team. They have 0 playmakers on offense. So if Houston gets off to a big lead, UConn has very little chance to come through the back door. That being said, when you're talking about quality defensive squads catching 28 points, there's going to be a segment of the betting markets that are interested. And especially when you have, a UConn team that all they've done is play competitive games this year and pretty much last year as well. But I'm telling you, watch that Huskies offense last week against Syracuse defensively, and it'd be very difficult for me to get to the window backing UConn here. I just don't trust them to move the ball against the Houston Cougars defense.
All right, baseball now. The Orioles and the Blue Jays, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Gossman against Sanchez. The Blue Jays $1.45, 8.5 the total. The Blue Jays are 86-70. The Orioles are 1 game back, and the Orioles have a 1.5 game lead over the Tigers after Detroit lost to Cleveland on Monday. They didn't want to have to come to this. That's Sanchez now at 179 innings, Teddy.
Yeah, Sanchez has been real solid. 13-2 with a 3.12 ERA, but this is a guy that only threw 92 innings as a rookie last year. They've really been trying to monitor his workload. And the fact that he begins the night at 179 innings, just look at the numbers. I just showed you 13-2, 312, or told you about 13-2, a 3.12 ERA. Over his last 6 starts, it's 4.73. He did hold Baltimore to 1 unearned run over 6 innings of work at Camden Yards during that span, but he had more walks than strikeouts in that game, and he wasn't sharp, needing 112 pitches to work through just 6 innings. And now, the one thing with Sanchez, Toronto's really made an effort to get him extra rest. He had 10 days off before his last start, and he's had 5 days off before this one. That being said, we are talking about a pitcher that hasn't been in these type of big games before at the big league level, and who may be running out of gas.
Gossman's up to 166 innings pitched, and he got roughed up last time out against the Red Sox. Before he's roughed up, previous 5 starts, 4-0 with a 0.82 ERA. Last start, 6 1/3, 5 runs, 10 hits, 2 home runs. Will his confidence be in the right place? Home, 6-2 with a 2.67. On the road, 2-9 with a 4.36 ERA, Teddy. Up next, the deep dive. More college coaches fired, and what does LSU do next? Plus, the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Hey, tune in today's MLB Odds Couple show for September 27th. It's an interesting time of year. Mike Brenner, Felix Hernandez is starting again. Wainwright is starting. It's an interesting card. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling better than them Cardinals are feeling today after that ass whooping.
You had 2 winners yesterday, Mike Brenner. You liking something on today's card?
I sure am. There's a lot sticking its head out. So when you guys are all done over there at Sportsbit, come on over because there's some edges and some angles that we're going to give you in MLB.
All right, the deep dive. No Jimmy Vaccaro this week. We'll try him next Tuesday. College coach continued to get fired. Les Miles, Cam Cameron out. Don't feel sorry for Les Miles. An astronomical buyout. Almost $13 million, Teddy.
Of course, that is minus whatever part of his annual $4.3 million has already been paid in 2016. But Les Miles certainly not walking away from LSU in dire poverty. Now, look at the odds to replace him from bookmaker.com. Tom Herman, Jimbo Fisher, and then a bunch of long shots. Why would Herman go there? Why would Fisher go there? I could only take long shots. Look at Kingsbury on that list, plus 1,600. That can't be serious, considering the issues that we just talked about with Texas Tech in the last segment. But the bottom line for LSU right now, it's not about who's going to replace him next year and what coach that the LSU is going to throw money at a year from now. It's about what LSU's going to do the rest of the way in 2016. Remember, this was a top 10 team. This was, in theory, a national championship contender coming into the campaign. And they've got a head coach in Ed Orgeron now who has been in this role before as an interim when Lane Kiffin got fired at USC back in 2013.
And you went 6-2 straight up, and the kids loved him, Teddy.
Yeah, they sure did. Honestly, I think that Orgeron, if there's one guy that might be able to coax some success out of LSU moving forward, that would be Ed Orgeron. Everybody loves him. He's a killer recruiter, and he's going to keep the players from rebelling because their coach got fired. For an interim guy, no issues with Orgeron. In fact, when it comes to a head coach moving forward, I don't really have an issue with Orgeron either. That being said, LSU still is one of the best defense coordinators in the nation in Dave Aranda. And let's not forget, the 2 losses they've suffered, where they give up 1 touchdown in the 2 games on defense. I mean, the defense has been great all year. The new offensive coordinator, Steve Ensminger, he's an LSU grad that's been an offensive coordinator with Texas A&M and Clemson. He's been back with the Tigers since 2010. And frankly, Cam Cameron, another guy who was just kind of cashing a check the last couple of years, this Ensminger may be an upgrade over Cameron, even though he's not a household name the way that Cameron has been. I'm expecting an inspired effort from this team against Missouri on Saturday night. We'll get back to that game when it comes to play of the day time.
All right, another coach whack. Notre Dame fires defensive coordinator Brian Van Gorder. I mean, it was ugly. Buechele lit him up week 1 at Texas. They beat Nevada, but who cares? Tyler O'Connor went up and down the field on him against Sparty, and then the debacle, the embarrassment against Duke Saturday.
Yeah, let me ask you this as a question, Paulie. Does it make you feel better when you lose a bet and then the coach gets fired after the game?
Yes.
Because it makes me feel worse. Because I feel like I should have known this guy was hanging on by a string. I should have known he didn't have it together. I had money on Notre Dame last week against Duke. And at 14-0, I was feeling great. Before that kick return touchdown, it couldn't have been any better. Of course, that was in the first quarter. And then, of course, Notre Dame's defense fell apart after that. Brian Van Gorder, he took over after Bob Diaco left. We talked about him as the UConn head coach. In his first season, 2014, the Fighting Irish had the worst defense of all the Brian Kelly years. They were only a little bit better last year, and as you mentioned, terrible so far this season. Terrible, and that's despite facing a Frosh and Buechele at Texas, a first-time starter in Tyler O'Connor at Michigan State. That was his second ever road start, and a redshirt Frosh and Daniel Johnson for Duke last week. So he hasn't even been facing good quarterbacks and giving up, 37 in regulation to Texas, 36 over 200 yards, both rushing and passing to Sparty, giving 31 to Duke and over 200 yards, both rushing and passing last week. And it's even worse when you look at what Sparty did against Wisconsin last week. Michigan State, they gashed Notre Dame, and they got nothing against Wisconsin. Duke gashed Notre Dame. They got nothing against Wake Forest and Northwestern. That's a coach that deserved to go, but whenever your coach gets fired in September, tells you shouldn't have brought him back after last year.
Yep, and Florida International fires Ron Turner. He was just counting the days down till retirement. He was 10-30.
I'm sorry to see Ron Turner go. I've had so much fun betting against Ron Turner over the years, whether it's with the Illinois Fighting Illini. We was a good bet against with the Chicago Bears. He's been a good bet against at Florida International. You will be missed, Ron Turner. Of course, we're talking about a team that's 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread this season, and they've lost to the point spread by 64.5 points, 3 scores per game. But look who they brought in to replace him, Paulie. Not a guy you have to be real excited about putting as your head coach moving forward.
Oh my God, Ron Cooper. Stints at Louisville, one of the worst in NCAA football. 2 years before he got there, 9-3, 6-5, then 7-4, 5-6, and 1-10. And the only win was against Illinois, who went 0-11.
Yeah, Ron Cooper. He's a guy with a track record that kind of reminds me of Ron Turner a little bit.
Yes.
I'm not convinced that FIU is going to be a bet-on team moving forward. Florida International hasn't been a bet-on team at any point since they joined the D1 ranks.
All right, you teased it twice. You mentioned we're 14-6-1 with the play of the day, and you said you expect a big effort out of LSU. Money time, play of the day.
Let's be accurate with those play of the day records. 14-6-1 with our football plays of the day. The baseball hasn't been as good. The basketball was pretty good last year. But whatever. It's football season. 14-6-1, as you mentioned. Play of the day time. Game number 204 in college football on Saturday. Let's lock in right here at the current number. LSU -13 versus Missouri. I'm expecting an inspired effort from the home favorite on Saturday night in Baton Rouge. Look for a blowout. Tigers -13 versus the Tigers. Take LSU as our play of the day.
All right, very good. More big game breakdowns tomorrow. Do pros bet parlays? We'll hit all that coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.